You always are nervous when you put all the work into building a wall.
Deep in the frozen wilderness of Alaska, where the wind cuts like steel and the silence feels almost alive, stands a lonely trapline hut that once belonged to Marty Meierotto, the legendary survivalist from Mountain Men. For years, it was just a place to escape the world. But that changed the moment shocking news erupted across the Alaskan frontier. Something was discovered inside that cabin. Something so disturbing, so heartbreaking, that even the toughest mountain men refused to speak about it. What they found has become one of the most chilling secrets ever whispered in the wild. This is the story they never wanted you to hear. Every winter, Marty vanished into the deep backcountry, living alone inside that primitive one-room hut, hundreds of miles from civilization. It was routine. It was predictable. He always checked in with a close friend. He always sent a message. He always kept a pattern. But this time, none of that happened. He simply disappeared. No calls, no tracks, no sign of movement. The first hint that something was wrong came from thin, unusual smoke drifting above the cabin, not thick enough to be from a wood stove, not normal enough to be written off as a harmless fire. Something was off. Two experienced trappers, both legends in their own right, decided to go check on Marty. These were men shaped by the Alaskan cold, men who had faced wolves, bears, storms, and the kind of nights that swallow entire forests in darkness. But even they felt uneasy as they trekked through the heavy snow toward the clearing where Marty's hut stood. Long before they reached the doorway, something felt deeply wrong. No footprints surrounded the cabin. No chopped wood lay by the wall. No food scraps, no smoke from the pipe, no marks from sled runners. Nothing. The cabin looked abandoned, yet the smoke earlier suggested someone was there. When the trappers approached the door, they saw it slightly open, just an inch, and anyone who knew Marty Meierotto knew one thing. He never left that door open. Not for animals, not for weather, not for anything. One of the trappers reached for the door. It creaked open with a long, sharp groan that felt like it cut through the cold air. And then they stepped inside. The moment they entered, they both froze. The inside of the cabin looked like a moment trapped in chaos. The table had been flipped. Gear was scattered across the floor. Tools were overturned. The stove was full of gray ash that looked recent, but untouched for days. A mug on the counter was half filled with frozen water. Marty's coat and his rifle, both essential for survival, were missing. But the worst part wasn't what they saw. It was what they felt. A heavy, suffocating silence pressed inside the cabin, thick enough to make breathing difficult. It was the kind of silence that felt alive, watching, waiting. One of the trappers walked toward the back wall, and then he stopped, every muscle locked. His voice dropped to a shaky whisper, "Don't come over here." But the second man was already beside him. What they saw in that moment, neither of them would ever describe again, not to friends, not to family, not to law enforcement. They backed out of the hut without speaking a single word, closed the door, and walked away through the falling snow. When they reached the nearest radio, all they said was, "We found something dreadful in Marty Meierotto's hut." And that was it. The story spread through nearby towns in Alaska so fast, it felt like the wind carried it. But no one had answers, only rumors. A search team formed consisting of 3 locals and a wildlife officer who knew Marty well. They headed toward the hut, hoping to bring clarity, but instead, they returned with more questions. When the search team entered the cabin, the same suffocating dread filled the air again. They found the same overturned gear, the same ash in the stove, the same scattered tools, but they also discovered new, chilling details. Near the back wall where the first trappers reacted in horror, the search team found faint drag marks across the floor. Not footprints, not animal tracks, drag marks. The wildlife officer knelt closer and saw something shiny wedged between the boards for a brief moment, something that made his face drain of color. He stood up instantly. When asked what he saw, he refused to answer. He avoided the question completely. The team left within minutes, too shaken to stay any longer. When they returned to town, their report was short, vague, and unhelpful. But the fear in their eyes said more than any words could. After the second visit to the Trapline hut, the rumors around the valley changed from simple concern to something far more unsettling. Strange sightings began to surface. A bush pilot flying low over the area reported seeing a sudden flash of light bounce off the roof of Marty Meierotto's cabin, like metal catching the sun for a split second. When he circled back only moments later, the light was gone. No movement, no reflection. Nothing but snow and silence. Another local claimed that one night, while trekking along the distant tree line, he saw a faint glow flickering inside the cabin. It was weak, like the dying pulse of a lantern flame. Yet by the time he looked again, the light had vanished completely. Swallowed by the darkness, locals tried to brush off these stories, blaming imagination or tricks of the cold. But no one truly believed that. Not deep down. There was a feeling in the air, a sense that the cabin wasn't just abandoned. It was somehow awake. Then came the discovery that changed everything. One of Marty's final journal pages surfaced, and what it contained sent an icy shiver through everyone who read it. The page held no explanation, no description of what he was wrestling with out there in the unforgiving wilderness. Just a single, chilling sentence in his unmistakable handwriting. I had to do it. I had no other option. No context, no notes. Just that one haunting line, followed by nothing but a blank page, as though whatever came after was too dark to admit, or too dangerous to leave behind. When winter finally began to release its grip and thin sunlight returned to the valley, 3 men made the difficult decision to go back to the hut. One of them had known Marty for over 10 years. The trail was still buried in patches of ice, but they pushed their way through the cold, determined to understand what the others had been too terrified to describe. The moment they stepped inside, they knew the cabin had changed again. A rope hung from one of the ceiling beams, freshly tied, the fibers clean and tight. On the windowsill lay Marty's winter coat. Not frozen, not stiff, but warm-looking, as if someone had removed it moments earlier. In the stove, half-burnt firewood sat in a bed of gray ash, unmistakable evidence that someone had recently lit a fire in what was supposed to be an abandoned hut. Nothing in that room felt old. Nothing felt untouched. Everything felt interrupted. And for the first time, the men wondered if they were truly alone in that cabin, or if something was waiting in the shadows they couldn't see. As darkness settled over the clearing, their lantern flickered uncontrollably. Every shadow stretched and shifted across the cabin's walls, moving in ways the light didn't. None of the men wanted to admit it, but all of them felt the same overwhelming presence. They were not alone inside that hut. They left before night fully claimed the valley. When they staggered back into town, their faces were pale and drained. Their official report was brief, barely a paragraph, and yet they refused to answer any questions about what they had felt, heard, or seen. Whatever happened inside those walls had shaken them beyond words. After their visit, the ranger who went with them quit his job entirely. The other 2 withdrew from the community, and the locals stopped talking openly about Marty Meierotto at all. The trail leading toward the hut eventually vanished under seasons of snow, branches, and silence. But the story did not fade. Every winter, when the wind screams across the valley and the land grows unnaturally still, people whisper the same unsettling rumors. Some believe Marty committed a crime. Others think someone else beat him to the cabin. And a few insist Marty is still alive, coming back under the cover of snow, returning to the hut when no one is watching. But the only truth anyone agrees on is this. Everyone who entered that hut came back different, pale, shaken, and unwilling to speak. Whatever happened there refuses to stay buried. Today, Marty Meierotto's hut still stands deep in the frozen backcountry of Alaska, buried in snow and heavy with secrets. Whatever happened inside those creaking walls remains untouched, unanswered, and feared. The question lingers like the cold air itself. What truly happened in that cabin? Why has everyone who entered chosen silence over truth? Until someone brave enough uncovers the final piece, This mystery will remain one of Alaska's darkest legends. If you want more stories like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.